I want to give my salams to everybody and welcome everybody to be with us. You see, many a times we hear people talk about covenant, covenant, and covenant. Yet, there is not much depth to it. I thought maybe today we can talk about all kind of covenants which are in the Bible and whatnot. Based on the political happening which is going on around the world in Middle East and whatnot, Akhi. Something which Muslims should know is why are these Christians beating the chest for that nation? Why are they keep telling us these are the blessed nation, these are the chosen people, and this is the con job of the century? That the Christians today are telling us that Israelites of today, that land, are the blessed nation, are the chosen people. This is the con job of the century. You see, this is something which is new, only 100 years old. Throughout whole Christian history, there was no such an idea. What happened? Where did it come from? And this is the conjab we're going to talk about, inshallah. Professor Ali Atai, he has about 8 hours on information about the history of Zayos and how they came about and why are they doing what they're doing. So if anybody wants some detailed information, please go and watch it. Today we're going to give a summarized understanding about the idea of covenants and what is the covenant, based on the idea that the Christians are telling us that the Israelites are the chosen people. They are committing apostasy. It's very weird, and it is for us Muslims, for some reason, I'm not sure why, to teach them their own Bible. You see, Akhi, could you read a verse for me in the Bible, inshallah? Let's start with that.
Sure, inshallah. What
Ahmad,
do
if
you
you are
mean?
here. Go to the book of Genesis, chapter 12, verse 2.
I'll just go to Bible Gateway. Give me 2 seconds. So Genesis chapter 12, verse 2. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing.
You see, Akhi, I will make you to a great nation. Is in Hebrew, Goy Gadol. Goy Gadol. We have the same idea in the Quran. When the Quran is talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam, and he says he's an ummah on his own, and he is Hanifan. You see that? So my Quran already telling us. Yet, when you are reading this, you saw Abraham there, right, Akhi?
Yeah.
But for some reason, every time Christians coming to you and talking to you, they tell you as if Israel is in there. Whosoever shall blesses Israel shall himself be blessed. This is the understanding which they have. Yet, who was Israel? Jacob. Yet he wasn't not born yet when this promise in chapter 12 is given. There is no such a thing as Israel. This is a blessing of Abraham, by the way, which we Muslims also have. Our blessed prophet, he told us the prayers about the Salatul Ibrahimiyya to bless Abraham and his descendants. Who taught us that? The Prophet of Islam taught us that, and we are doing this. Yet, these Christians, instead of telling us about the covenant, whatnot, they see Israel for some reason. And today, we're gonna take away this con job, and maybe, and I'm telling you, everything I'm saying, actual Catholic who has studied his religion will agree with me. Actual Orthodox people who have studied their religion, they will agree with me. Akhi, could you read the Quran, by the way?
Sure. What do you need?
Chapter 37, verse 108 until 111. Because you see the idea of this Goy Gadol, the great nation, and Abraham being blessed, and this is a sign, by the way, of the true God. All of that is in my Quran. My Quran is telling me one by one. But Akhi, you read the Quran, inshallah, then we get into it.
Chapter 37, verse 107 onwards?
108 until 111.
Oh, 108. Yeah, that's fine. And and blessed Abraham with honorable mention among later generations. Peace be upon Abraham. This is how we reward the good doers. He was truly one of our faithful servants. and later gave him good news of Ishaq, a prophet and one of the righteous. Continue.
No, you see, Akhi, my Quran is telling us about this blessing and even about his son which came to him. For us, all of them are true prophets of God, alayhum salam. We have no issue with admitting and saying that. Yet, for some reason, these Christians come to you, they look at this nation who is rejecting Jesus for somewhat, Akhi, blessed, just by the virtue that they are the children of Abraham, so they claim. Right? Just by the virtue that they are the children, they are of the bloodline that makes them blessed. Yet my Quran goes against that. Akhi, could you read the next two verses of the same chapter?
Sure. We later gave him good news of Ishaq, a prophet and one of the righteous. We blessed him and Ishaq as well. Some of their descendants did good, while others wronged themselves. And we certainly showed favor to Musa and Harun.
So you see, Akhi, so my Quran is talking about the descendants of them. Amongst them are true believers, which we call the Muslims at the time. Yet amongst them are the wrongdoers, which means you are not blessed by the virtue just being by bloodline. What do I mean? Akhi, think about it. Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu. He was a Persian. He was not from the bloodline of Ishmael, yet he is promised Jannah. Yet Abu Lahab, who actually is from the descendants of Abraham alayhi salam, he is promised Jahannam. So think about it. Just being the descendants doesn't mean nothing. The same verses which we are reading of Genesis chapter 12 about the blessing of Abraham and giving them great nation. The commentary of Faith Love Study Bible links this to Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 23, which God is giving them warning, the condition of the covenant. It says, watch out for yourself so that you do not forget the covenant of Yahweh, your God, that he made with you and made for you yourself, and don't make for you a divine image, which Yahweh has forbidden. So you see, Akhi, what was the covenant? That they should worship the true God. They should not go around and make images of other idols. Do we have that in Islam or not, Akhi?
Yes. So hopefully now you know what the topic's about. If you can continue, Barakallah
And this
fikum.
is also for my Muslim brethren. As soon as you talk about covenant, Akhi, what do you hear? Genesis chapter 17, everlasting covenant, Abraham and his seed. Beautiful,
I use it.
wallahi,
I
no
say that.
issue with that. No, beautiful, no issue with that. But as if it is end all and be all. Some Muslims, akhi, I have seen them without having studied something, just have heard couple of arguments. They go on a hill and they die on that hill. It's just very weird. You see, let me read you something and tell me, akhi, what do you think about if I'm reading this? It says, behold, I'm establishing my covenant with you and with your seed after you and with every living creature and whatnot. And as the sign of the covenant. Akhi, where do you think of when I'm reading this?
Genesis 17.
What if I told you I'm reading Genesis 9? You see, this is one of the first covenants which are given. This is a covenant which is given to Noah. It says this, as for me, behold, I'm establishing my covenant with you and with your seed after you and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and every animal of earth with you, from all that came out of the ark to all the animals on earth. I'm establishing my covenant with you, that never again will all the flesh be cut off from waters and whatnot. And as the sign which is given later is the rainbow. Now, akhi, this is with every creature. So if I'm telling, even according to the Bible, me as a non-Israelite, have a covenant? Wallahi, the Jews will tell you yes. These Christians, this is what I'm telling, the con job of the century, the love, the blind taqleed, which they are doing of this Zayo, on telling us this nation, who's mostly atheistic, yet they are rejecting Jesus. These are the blessed nation and whatnot. It's just weird. It's idolatry. You see, iodai is the Greek word for a Jew, and idolatry is idolatry. And I'm not dissing, wallahi, I'm not saying, think about it. These Christians believe in the concept of Trinity. They be telling you the second person of Trinity incarnated, and they be telling you he was not a Muslim, he was a Jew. Which means they are already worshiping a Jew, at least one Jew. Yet their blindness about their own history, their own tradition, their own misunderstanding of their own scriptures has brought them into a situation that they are apostating without knowing. Faith Love Study Bible writes about covenants in the Old Testament. It says the covenant of Genesis chapter 6, verse 18, Genesis chapter 9, verse 9, which I was reading, was the covenant that Yahweh made with Noah. So already we have another covenant. There is another covenant which is between Yahweh and Abraham. Genesis 15, Genesis 12, which we were reading, Akhi. Yahweh promised the land. He promised them the descendants. He promised them great nation. He gave them all of that. There is another covenant which is later between Abraham and Yahweh, which goes through Isaac specifically. Genesis chapter 26. By the way, I'm going to a tangent. They come to you, Akhi. They say the Bible says the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It doesn't say the God of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob, as if Ishmael has another God or something. They'll be asking you why? Why, if you have the same God, why is only these people mentioned and Ishmael not mentioned? I'm telling you, these people are blind. You see, when he's talking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, he's telling the God of your forefathers. Was Ishmael the forefathers of the Jews? He wasn't. So why would he be mentioned when he's talking about the God and the forefathers of these people? This is why he's not mentioned. If we go to the Arabs, who are the descendants of Ishmael, when they talk about their forefathers, they won't mention Isaac and Jacob, neither, because these people are not their forefathers. You see that? So just because he's not mentioned doesn't mean nothing. But today I'm not talking about the covenant of Ishmael. I'm just trying to understand what the Jews mean when they say covenant, when they say blessing. What do the Christians mean when they say blessing and the covenant? Because biblically, these two are against each other. Yet for some reason, these Christians who have the new covenant be telling you these people who are rejecting Jesus are the true blessed people. There is another covenant, Moses and Yahweh, which is established in the book of Exodus chapter 19. This is just before the covenant code. Yahweh and Israel will enjoy a unique relationship, Moses receiving a law, including the dialogue, which is the Ten Commandments. So think about it. If you want to talk about covenant, you have to know what covenant are you talking about. Ahmed, if I'm asking you, Akhi, do you know anything of the covenant of salt?
No.
No. So when you are talking about Genesis chapter 17, which is good, I'm not denying that, but you have to understand, what does covenant mean? What is a covenant? What type of covenant do you have? You see, the commentary on Genesis 9, it says, my covenant. A covenant is either a contract or when only one party pledges anything, a promise. The first person language of this covenant shows that this is a unilateral promise or a divine charter. It does not depend on Noah. God's integrity and power serves as its basis. God says, I will do it. He's gonna do it. Either Noah likes it or not. This is what they say. They say the sign of the covenant, which is given in verse 12. It says the sign serves as a reminder of the promise, or as a tangible guarantee of God's commitment to keep the promise. So as you see in Genesis, you get the sign of the promise. With Moses, you gain the sign of the promise. Even with Noah. They say the proper definition of covenant is debated, but some biblical scholars who see that the covenant in antiquity represent sealing a secret kingship bonds between two parties of both legal sanctions and liturgical riot. As Harvard professor M. Cross explains, covenant, a widespread legal means by which the duties and privileges of kingship may be extended to another individual or group, including aliens. This is the general definition of what a covenant is. You have the divine covenant, Adam. You hear that, Akhi?
Mhm.
Adam, Noah, Abraham. So if you go to the Jew and tell them, you see, I want to believe in your God, they say, sure, come, and you are with the covenant, and they call you a Noahide, a pious Goyim, they be calling you. Why Noahide? Because of this, Genesis 9, the covenant which God made with every creature, which means you can come to that God, but only that covenant, which was specifically for you. And this is what the Quran, by the way, also says about talking about Israelites and telling them, remember the blessing which I bestowed upon you. My Quran is already telling that. But they say the first stage of the divine covenant plan is revealed in the marital covenant between Adam and Eve. Because, Akhi, if you know, Maimonides had about 613 laws, mitzvot. The first one, one of the earliest one, is that you should go get married, you should go and have children. This is why Genesis 1 is talking about Adam and Eve going and they are multiplying. So this is the first covenant for marriage. Even after they violated the covenant, God's justice is mitigated by his sworn mercy. God renews domestic covenant with Noah and his household, Genesis chapter 6. God renews a tribal covenant with Abraham. Akhi, you hear that? Tribal covenant. Do you disagree that the children of Isaac also had their own covenant?
No, it would make sense if they
No,
had their own tribal
right?
covenant.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yet that covenant was not the same covenant as Ishmaelites, because these are tribal covenants. You see that? This is
Wow.
what I'm telling you. There are
Can
different
you repeat that point
understanding
again,
of
Ali?
covenant.
Can you repeat that point again?
It says God renews a domestic covenant with Noah and
Mhm.
his household, Genesis chapter 6. And God renews a tribal covenant with Abraham, who is
Wow.
called to serve as a channel of God's fatherly blessing to all nations. So he's the mean to bless all the nations. And even the Quran says that, and even the Old Testament says that. And here, Ahi, starts the con of the century. How the Jews understand this, and how the Christians understand it, but how the Jews, for some reason, have misled these Christians to not see what their own covenant is. They say this Abrahamic covenant advances in three distinct divine covenants. God first make a kingship covenant with Abraham, Genesis
Mhm.
15, 1 to 21, which
Yep.
is then renewed with Abraham. You see, his name was Abraham. He was later changed with Abraham.
Mhm.
Though the covenant of circumcision, Genesis 17, through the covenant of circumcision, finally God rewards his servants' loyal obedience. At the Akedah, Akedah is where about the sacrifice of the child. It is called Akedah.
Right.
Akedah, by swearing a new covenant with Abraham's seed, a new one. These covenants are cumulative. Genesis 15 describes the initial covenant with Abraham, where God upgrades his earlier promise to make of him a great nation. Genesis chapter 12, verse 2, which we are talking about. And Akhi, inshallah, it will become clear why I keep emphasizing Genesis chapter 12, because everything goes around these verses here. There's the circumcision covenant of Genesis 17 upgrades the second promise of the great name of Genesis 12, verse 2, which we were reading, into a covenant of kingship over many nations, Genesis 17. Genesis 22 describes how God swears a covenant oath. They be telling you, what does your Allah swear? Yet we see here that Yahweh is swearing a covenant oath to the seed of Abraham, following the Akedah to confirm the third promise to make him a source of God's fatherly blessing, all nation. Subsequently, divine covenant in salvation history are grounded in Abrahamic covenant. You see, everything I'm reading, me as a Muslim agree with that. The Jew comes and agree with that, and the Christians come and agree with that. There is no issue here. I'm just explaining what is covenant on. Akhi, I'm just trying to still man these Jews and Christians. I'm not talking about Islamic understanding. How do we see it? The Ishmaeli covenant. None of that. I'm just teaching what the Bible is talking about covenant. They talk about the next covenant, which is the Mosaic covenant. In the Exodus, when the Lord delivers Israel from Egyptian slavery, he renews the covenant with Moses at Sinai. This reconstitutes the 12th tribe into a kingdom of priests. Remember that? The covenant of Moses makes them into the kingdom of priests. A nation family of God, Exodus chapter 19 until 24. Israel's subsequent worship of the calf necessitates a renewal and reconfiguration of the covenant. You see that, Akhi? The worship of the calf necessitates a renewal of the covenant, which is in Exodus chapter 34.
So they had
where
to
the
renew the
general
covenant that already
priesthood.
existed because they
Yes, you
disobeyed.
see,
Because you're
this is
basically
my
saying
point,
that,
Akhi. I
yeah.
started with Adam, and it renewed the covenant with Noah. It renewed with Abraham, a couple of times with Abraham, and going back to Moses, and going to David, and going to Solomon, and we're gonna end up with the New Testament. So I'm going step by step, if you get my drift.
Yeah. So basically, just to understand it, it's because God chose to renew, and there's different types of covenants. There's tribal covenants, as you mentioned, but there's also covenants, or the renewal of covenants, because the disobeying of the people and God being merciful is like, fair enough, you disobeyed me, but you can now renew this covenant that I made with you, and let's continue forward. Essentially, that's what I've gotten so far, correct?
Exactly, because all of these covenants are conditional, and I'll get to that inshallah. So because these people are breaking the covenant, they are worshipping the calf, it necessitates the renewal and reconfiguration of the covenant. The Levitical covenant, you see, another covenant. The Levitical covenant brings about a number of legal changes and additions. Exodus 35, Leviticus 27. After 40 years of continuous rebellions in the desert, culminating with idolatry and harlotry of the second generation at Ben Peor, the covenant undergoes a second major renewal and reconfiguration with the Deuteronomical law. Okay, you see that. So keep on again and again and again, the new covenant, they break it, there is a new covenant, new condition, new way. This is very important. I'm telling you why, Akhi. Because they keep telling us these are the blessed nation, these are the chosen people, they are the covenantal nation. Let's see if they are like that. The Deuteronomical covenant is distinguished from the initial covenant at San'a, also called Horeb. See Deuteronomy 29:1. In addition to a theophany, Moses now becomes Israel's lawgiver and gives them many statutes unique to Deuteronomy, including permission for monarchy, chapter 17, total warfare, 20, usury, chapter 23, divorce and remarriage, Deuteronomy 24. Jesus will teach that some of these Deuteronomical statutes were not the divine ideal, but based on the breaking of the covenant, God had to give it to them. You see the renewal covenant? This is because of this. After that, you have the Davidic covenant. Under the Davidic covenant, the Lord elevates the nation of Israel to an international kingdom. This covenant is announced in Nathan's prophetic oracles, 2 Samuel chapter 7, 15 to verse 5 to 16. Although the word covenant only appears in other texts as 2 Samuel 35 and whatnot, yet they interpreted as talking about the Davidic covenant. Distinctive aspects of this Davidic covenant includes an everlasting throne, the gift of divine sonship for anointed heirs, and the centrality of Zion and Jerusalem temple. Okay, all of this is important. Please remember these words. To which pilgrims come from all Israel and all the nation. After a period of Solomonic glory, when the features of the Davidic covenant seem to be partially fulfilled, 1 Kings chapter 4 until 10, the kingdom entered in a long period of division and decline. After this, the prophets announced a new covenant. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31. And they say compare that to Isaiah 55 verse 1 or Isaiah 59, which also talks about this stuff which the people are doing. And based on that, the covenant is getting renewed again and again and again. As you see, Achi, this new covenant is set in sharp contrast to the broken Mosaic law. Compare Jeremiah 31, 32. Compare Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 33. But in continuity with the Davidic covenant, which it would restore in a transformative manner. So you see that, Achi, this is the idea of covenants and covenants and covenants in the Old Testament. Different covenants with different nations for different purpose. And yes, these Israelites got their own covenant. Nobody is denying that. Yet it is not the end all and be all, as these people are pretending to be, as if only that nation is the chosen nation. Only that nation is the blessed nation. Which nation is it? Is the nation of today, which are the secular people who are ruling by democracy, who are mocking the sign of the covenant of the rainbow for giving the biggest gay parade in Tel Aviv, couple of miles away from Sodom and Gomorrah. Is this the blessed nation? Is it this nation of today, or were they the true believers of Abraham's faith? Were the true believers of the holders of the covenant? Which one is it? My Quran told us they are true believers amongst them, but also wrongdoers, which means these people are not blessed. These people are not part of the covenant. Why? As we see, they are breaking it. Now, for some reason, these Christians who always come to you, they be telling you, it's Old Testament, it's Old Testament, it's the law of Moses, it's Old Testament. Why do they do that? Because they be telling you, see, I believe in the New Testament, in the New Covenant. Thank you very much. If you believe in the New Covenant, why are you keep referring back to the Old Covenant, of which you are telling us is no more? How could you, with having the New Covenant based on Jesus, turn around to them people who broke their covenant by which the covenant should have been renewed? Why you keep telling me they are chosen if there is a new covenant? Let me read you something. The Hebrew word for covenant in the Old Testament is berit, which in the Septuagint constantly renders it in Greek as diatheke. There is There is little doubt that the New Testament authors followed the practice of the Septuagint and employed the term diatheke to mean berit, covenant. However, because many classical Hellenistic sources also use diatheke to refer to a last will or testament, some older English translation like KJV render diatheke as testament in certain passages. Now, could you read me a verse of the Bible?
Sure, what do you need?
Hebrews chapter 9, verse 15 to 17.
Hebrews.
By the way, Akhi, if there is something which is unclear, if I go through it fast or I talk too fast and whatnot, please, Akhi, tell me. Maybe I can give you more information. Otherwise, let's move on and read Hebrew.
Yeah. Doubly backdrop, by the way. I think it was Espero. So, Espero doubly backdrop. Someone requesting? Who was Ufti requesting? If you guys have any questions, by the way, I should have made this clear. If you have any questions, Ali is happy to take them on the fly if you just type them in. But if you think they're a little bit more technical or whatever, happy to wait. And then come up and ask your questions and then we can go from there. Barakallahu feekum. So, Hebrews chapter 9, verses 15 to 17.
Verses 15 to 17.
Therefore, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, since a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. For where a will is involved, the death of the one who made it, it must be established. For a will takes effect only at death, since it is not in force as long as the one who made it is alive. Interesting.
Beautiful. So you saw there new covenant and the first covenant. Yet,
Yeah.
what if I told you the word diatheke, which means covenant, is used 3 times in that passage? You just read 2, the new covenant and the first covenant.
That's
Yet
true.
the word diatheke is used for the next sentence after first covenant to say for where a will is involved. You see that? That
Where a
will
will
is
is involved,
diatheke.
Right.
This commentary says the word diatheke is translated as covenant is Hebrew chapter 9 verse 15, but as will in the following verses. Some see the author switching to the classified classical meaning of diatheke in these latter verses, where the discussion seems to revolve around executing a will at the person's death. However, the author of Hebrews may also refer to covenant as he does in 10 to 17. Indeed, the covenant under consideration is broken. Covenant at Sana'a. The Greek of these verses may be translated as following. For where a broken covenant is involved, it is necessary for death of the covenant maker to be born. For a broken covenant is enforced upon dead bodies, since it certainly is not enforced while the covenant maker still lives. This is how it should be translated. But Akhi, you read your Bible, right? Let's see what a difference it makes. The author of Hebrews is emphasizing that the broken Sinai covenant required the death of Israel. The blessed nation, they be telling you. The chosen people of today, they be telling you. They say the author of Hebrews is emphasizing that the broken Sinai covenant required the death of the Israelites. Exodus chapter 32, verse 9 and 10 they give. Because of the curse of the death they put on themselves. And I get, you see, Galatians chapter 3, everybody who is living by the law is under the curse of the law and whatnot. I get to all of them. But what I'm telling you, Akhi, many of Muslims talk about Galatians chapter 3, verse 13, he is accursed and whatnot. Yet we don't understand what he's talking about. and I'll get to them inshallah. So the author of Hebrews, I told you why this translation make it very different. And this is the commentary. The author of Hebrews is emphasizing that the broken Sinai covenant required the death of Israelites because of the curse of death they put themselves under by swearing the covenant oath at Sinai. They gave the covenant, they broke it. This is why the law requires the death of Israelites. This is the new covenant. And I'll get to that, what it means. Due to God's previously sworn mercy to Abraham, the curse of death was not executed at the time, Exodus chapter 32. But that is precisely what Christ endures as he's unalived on behalf of Israel, Hebrews 9:15. And I get to that, what that means. Okay, here starts the con job. This is what Christians believe. They believe in the New Testament, in the New Covenant. But for some reason, they reject that New Covenant. They apostate. They be telling you the Old Covenant people who are finished, yet our blessed nation. A similar
How could they be
translation
blessed?
problem occurs in Galatians. Sorry, Achi?
How could that nation be blessed if the covenant has been revoked from them and moved on to another?
This is the con job of the century by letting millions and millions of these Christians believe you have the new covenant, yet my old covenant is the blessing.
That's
Akhi, they say the
wild.
similar translation problem occurs in Galatians chapter 3 verse 15. To give a human example, brethren, no one annuls even a man's will, diateke, or adds to it once it has been ratified. In the context of Galatians chapter 3, 15 to 18, Paul is discussing the fixed nature of the oath sworn covenants, since even a human covenant cannot be changed after it has been solemnly sworn. Galatians chapter 3 and Old Testament, Joshua chapter 9. God's sworn covenant certainly cannot be. God cannot change his covenant with Abraham to bless all nations through his seed. Compare that to Galatians chapter 3 verse 14 by adding the Mosaic law as a condition 400 years later. You see, Galatians chapter 3 is talking about curse of the law and Jesus, and I get to that inshallah. But he's talking about both of them cannot go together. Either you follow the Mosaic covenant or you have the renewal covenant, which is the Jesus covenant, as you say. They say to Paul, if it is unjust for a human to attempt to add new conditions or alter a covenant after it has been sworn, it is no less for God. All occurrences of diatheke in the New Testament may and should be translated covenant, following the consistencies of examples which was given in the Septuagint. So you see that, Akhi? So when you're talking about the new covenant, as the book of Hebrews talking about, the old one is gone, is dead, is unalived. These Christians come to you and tell you, the same people, all the blessed nation, all the chosen nation. Hey, do you believe in the New Testament? Do you believe in the new covenant? Let's see what the new covenant says. The Gospels, especially Matthew and Luke, clearly depict Jesus as the son of David, and thus the one to restore the Davidic kingdom covenant. Wait a minute. Akhi, remember I told you there are different covenants for different purpose through different people. According to this gospel, Jesus is fulfilling that covenant, the Davidic covenant.
Right.
Not the Mosaic one, the Davidic, according to the synoptics. Right. Exactly. And I get to the Abrahamic covenant. This is what I mean. Every writer is giving his understanding.
This is tripping me out, Ali. I'm not even joking, bro. What happened to the Abrahamic one then? Did that get abolished?
Exactly.
What the hell is
Exactly.
going on?
Akhi, this is what I mean. Remember I told you, we Muslims go to the Bible. We say the Bible says this, the Bible says that, the Bible says this. Akhi, I told you always, before you get to the meaning, what does it mean what the text says? You have to ask, why does the text saying what the text is saying? The why is very important, because every writer has different understanding of this theology which is given. In the synoptic, Jesus is depicted as the son of David and thus the one to restore the Davidic kingdom covenant. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 to 25. Luke chapter 1, 31 to 33. 69, chapter 2 and 4. They say at the Last Supper, Jesus explicitly identifies his body and blood as the new covenant. Akhi, remember that. What was the new covenant? According to the synoptic, his body and his blood as the new covenant promised by the prophets. And they quote Jeremiah 31:31, which is talking about the new covenant, fulfilling the oracles of Isaiah regarding the servant of the Lord, who would not simply make a covenant, but would become one. Jesus is the covenant. Jesus is the blessed one. And I get to that. Why and how and could you be part of that blessing? But by rejecting him, you have broken the covenant. John's gospel presents Jesus performing 7 signs in connection with the 7 temple feasts. Chapter 2, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11. In order to show how the risen Jesus is the new temple. Remember, the new covenant in the synoptic was his body and blood. The new temple is Jesus. Jesus also declares the new commandments to be precisely that life-giving love that he embodies and imparts to all believers. John chapter 13, chapter 15. 17 of the 33 occurrences of covenant in the New Testament are found in the book of Hebrews. The author of Hebrews argues for the superiority of the new covenant over the old one. As we read, Rahi, the old one is dead, is unalive, is get away with. Yet the same people who come to you, tell you the new covenant, tell you about Jesus, the same people apostate all of a sudden. They say, oh, the covenant is with them people, the covenant is with the Israelites and whatnot. Hey, according to the New Testament, that is finished. They say the author of Hebrews argues for the superiority of the new covenant against the old covenant based on the better promises, mediator, sacrifice, high priesthood, oath, sanctuary, and whatnot going on. Hebrews chapter 1 until chapter 9. All of this is the result of the royal high priestly work of Christ as God's firstborn son. Hebrews chapter 1 verse 6. While the new covenant surpassed the Mosaic, it does so by restoring and transforming the Davidic one. For Jesus is also the son of David, who rules eternally from the heavenly Zion. Heavenly Zion all of a sudden. And I get why it's important. You remember when I was talking about the Davidic covenant, I was talking about this international covenant and the covenant of restoring Zion. Now in the new covenant, we have heavenly Zion. Similar echoes are repeated throughout the New Testament where Jesus manifests his rule over Israel and all the nation. Who? Jesus. What does he do? Manifest his position above and over Israel. Why? Because he's the new covenant, you see. The old covenant is gone. Yet these Christians who believe in Jesus, they be telling you Jesus did, Jesus that. The new covenant and the New Testament keep telling you the old people who reject this new covenant are the chosen people. You see the conjob, Akhi? You see the conjob that these people who reject Jesus are blessed by other people who accept him. And I get to that. How does that go against the New Testament and Christian history as a whole?
That's
He says
crazy,
he
bro.
does this so Jesus manifests his superiority over Israel through his 12 royal ministers, Luke chapter 22 and Matthew chapter 19, and his royal steward, Peter, and they give you Matthew 16 and Isaiah chapter 22. James sees the church growing amongst the Jews and Gentiles as a fulfillment of Amos's prophecy that God would restore the fallen tent, and they interpret that tent as the kingdom of David. So you see that even Christians after Jesus are saying this, that Christianity is the fulfillment of the covenant. Christianity is the true covenant. And by that, I mean believing in Jesus. I told you, I'm talking about their belief. I'm trying to still man them to understand their own belief, what they teach. The apocalypse points to the consummation of salvation history with unveiling of the bridal church as the new Jerusalem. So, Akhi, remember, we have a new body, we have a new temple, and we have a new Jerusalem. Right? You with me? We have synoptic, we have John, and we have the understanding of other people. Right? We had the Old Testament, we had the different understanding, and the broken, and the renewal of it. Right? So, Akhi, you follow with me, Old Testament, going through Testament and understanding it, and on.
So far, I understand all the Old Testament stuff and the renewal and the breaking of all the different types of covenant that exist, and then the fact that
I
Jesus
will go through that. I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
the New Testament is just starting.
Yeah. So Jesus was fulfilling the Davidic covenant, but then what happened to the other covenants? And so I'm sort of following along so far, but it's this is deep, bro. I didn't realize the covenant stuff was actually this in depth. I thought it was just basic
I told
covenants
you
that
this
were given
covenant
passed on.
stuff is, and that this is what I mean, Akhi. As if these people don't read, as if these people don't know. They hear Jews, they hear Israel, they hear covenant, and blind taqlid kicks in, and they go at it.
This is a very, very interesting topic with respect to covenants, how we understand them. There's not just one covenant, people. There's a multiplicity of covenants in the Old Testament, and this is what Ali is going through, and what the actual con is, and how Christians have basically people that left the covenant, the Christians are calling them blessed, right? People that walked away from the covenant, the Nasranis are calling them blessed people and a blessed nation, and so on and so forth, when they're not, right? So Ali is going through all of that.
So the new covenant also fulfills the other covenants of salvation history. You are talking about these other covenants. Jesus is the new Adam. You remember I was talking about the first covenant with Adam. Jesus is the new Adam, Romans chapter 5, verse 12 to 19, who also makes us new creation. Okay, remember these words, new creation, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. He fulfills and sworn the promises given to Abrahamic covenant, Luke chapter 1, verse 72, Romans chapter 4, and Galatians chapter 3 and 4. Christ also fulfills the Mosaic covenant with his new Passover, his new Exodus, Luke chapter 9. For Paul, it is by the power of the Holy Spirit that the divine law, which was given to Israel in the Mosaic covenant, is fulfilled in the new covenant. Romans chapter 8, chapter 10, and chapter 13. The notion of covenant reaches its zenith in Christ, who fulfills the divine covenant not only in who he is as the eternal Son of the Father, but by what he accomplished in causing us to share in the grace of his own divine sonship. 1 John chapter 3. The new covenant of Christ ends up fulfilling the old covenant in a way that it surpasses the greatest hopes of the ancient Israelites. even as it will exceed our own expectations. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9. Let me give you a summary in a couple of seconds. We went through the Old Testament about the first covenant, Adam, the other covenant with Noah, the other covenant with Abraham, which was the renewal couple of times, and the Mosaic covenant, and the Levitical covenant, and the broken of that covenant, and the renewal of that covenant. We went back to Davidic covenant and Solomonic glory, which they got, and they broke that again. Then we went to Jeremiah, coming with a new covenant, Isaiah 55, a new covenant. We went to the New Testament. We went to the Synoptic, which is talking about the Davidic covenant. We went to John, which is talking about Jesus being the temple. We went to Revelation, which is the church as the new Jerusalem. We went to Corinthians, which is Jesus is the new Adam, new creation. So, Akhi, do you get the evolution from the beginning until now?
SubhanAllah, bro. I do. Not all of it. Still need to get my head around all of it. Oh, wow.